My father insisted on hosting my birthday dinner this year. Said it was long overdue, which was his way of pretending last year's silent treatment never happened. He reserved a private room at a steakhouse just outside the city-white tablecloths, heavy chairs, servers with napkins over their forearms. Too much. But then again, that was his signature. Theatrics draped in forced sincerity. I arrived 10 minutes early, as always. My sister Nora was already there, scrolling through her phone, wine untouched. My mother appeared next, all apologies and perfume. Then him. Suit jacket unbuttoned, tan sharper than it should have been for November. Smile too wide for someone who hadn't called in months. The waiter brought a bottle of red. My father selected himself. Something bold, he said, grinning. Tonight calls for a celebration. We ordered food fillets, asparagus, a lobster tail. For fun, and talked in cautious fragments. Nora kept things afloat, asking about my work, the house renovation, whether I was still seeing what's her name. My father didn't ask anything, just smiled, nodded, kept glancing toward the bar. Then, as the plates were being cleared, he stood. I'd like to make a toast, he said, already pouring from a second bottle no one asked for. To my sonth. 33. Today. Independent. Smart. Driven. All the things I may not have said out loud, but always believed. He filled each glass with deliberate precision. Mine last. His hand lingered over it for a second too long. He didn't make eye contact, just pushed it gently toward me, nodding once. Something about the way his eyes flicked up not at me, but at my hand, tightened something in my chest. Cheers, he said, lifting his glass. I smiled, clinked, and switched glasses mid-motion. Simple sleight of hand, masked by a lean toward my sister. He didn't notice. I watched him drink. The glass was cold in my hand, smooth, expensive, and untouched. I brought it to my lips and let the wine rest there, never swallowing. Across the table, my father tilted his back like it was water. He smiled afterward, too broadly, then resumed cutting his steak with a little too much precision. I set the glass down and kept smiling. Dinner moved forward in practiced rhythms. Nora joked about something on TV. My mother brought up a cousin I hadn't seen in years. The waiter returned with dessert menus no one asked for. My father glanced at his watch, then at me. I caught it. Brief, but unmistakable. Like someone waiting for something to start. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. At first it was subtle. He blinked more often, missed a beat in conversation, reached for the breadbasket, and knocked over a fork instead. Long day, he muttered, brushing it off. By the time the crème brûlée arrived, he was sweating. Not obvious to anyone else yet, but I saw it, the damp at the collar, the way he loosened his tie without realizing it. His voice slurred slightly as he told a story from his law firm days. The ending didn't land. Dad? Nora asked, brows drawn. You okay? I'm fine, he said too quickly, waving her off with a clumsy hand. Didn't eat lunch. Low blood sugar, that's all. He tried to stand, stumbled, gripped the back of his chair with too much force. My mother reached for his arm, but he brushed her off, heading for the restroom without another word. Nora looked at me, concerned. What was that? Probably what he said, I replied, voice even. Skipped lunch. Long day. She nodded, still unsure. I picked up the glass he'd poured for me and turned it slightly under the light. A faint shimmer near the edge. Almost nothing. Almost. I didn't speak. Didn't react. Just let the silence settle back over the table, while the sounds of the restaurant carried on around us. He'd recover, I was sure, but not before I confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't an accident, and he'd made the wrong assumption about who was still playing the obedient son. I didn't say anything on the drive home. Nora offered to take Dad's car, let him rest, but he insisted he could manage. My mother hovered. murmuring that he was probably just tired, that he'd been working too hard again. Everyone wanted to move past it. I didn't. Back in my apartment, I turned off every light but one and sat at the kitchen counter, turning the wine glass slowly in my hand. The faint shimmer I'd noticed earlier was still there, barely visible now that the wine was gone, just a translucent residue clinging to the inside. It could have been nothing. Or something. The thought that he might have actually done it, put something in my drink, should have made me angry. But anger never came. Just the low hum of awareness, the cold pull of old instincts rising to the surface. He'd always been a master of appearances. The kind of man who believed control was love and obedience was respect. Growing up, he didn't yell. He didn't need to. He made expectations clear through silence and consequence. A B+ meant a week without electronics. Sarcasm earned a locked bedroom door. When I got into art school, he didn't forbid I'd just cut off the savings account and told me I'd learn faster without a safety net. My first girlfriend vanished after he took her aside to talk. I never got the details, but she stopped returning my calls 2 days later. When I started my own business, he called it a hobby with invoices. Every time I pushed for independence, he responded with offers disguised as favors. Money I didn't ask for, connections I never used. It always came with the same line, "I just want what's best for you." I used to believe that. But tonight, as I sat with the glass in my hand and the residue staring back at me, I knew better. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't exhaustion, or blood sugar, or stress. He'd poured that drink carefully, watched me lift it, waited for something, and I wasn't going to let it slide. The glass was still warm from my palm as I wrapped it in a cloth napkin and slid it into my coat pocket. Thick fabric, deep lining, no risk of it cracking on the way out. Nora was saying something as we walked to the valet stand, but I barely registered it. My father had already driven off, claiming he felt 100% better. My mother nodded along, already rewriting the story in her head. Low blood sugar, not enough water, too much wine. Something explainable, something neat. I made my excuses quickly. Early meeting tomorrow, deadlines piling up. Promised a client I'd send a deck by sunrise. All lies, but no one questioned it. The drive home was quiet. Streetlights flicked past like slow blinks. I kept checking the rearview mirror, though I didn't expect to see anyone there. Paranoia wasn't usually my style. Then again, neither was poison at birthday dinner. Back at the apartment, I walked straight to the kitchen, opened a drawer, pulled out a freezer bag, double-layered it, slid the napkin-wrapped glass inside like it was something fragile, which it was. Evidence, maybe. Insurance, definitely. I sealed the bag and placed it deep in the freezer, behind an old box of frozen dumplings and a half-full bottle of vodka I hadn't touched in months. Then I stood there for a while, just breathing. The apartment was silent, in the way only apartments can be, hollow, and filled with everything unsaid. I didn't put on music, didn't scroll my phone, didn't check emails. I replayed the moment over and over. The way he pushed the glass forward, the forced smile, the toast that felt a little too polished, a little too rehearsed, and the brief flick of his eyes, watching to make sure I drank. He didn't think I'd notice. He still thought I was the version of me that needed his approval. The kid who mistook manipulation for guidance, who said thank you when being steered off course, as long as it came wrapped in concern. But he'd miscalculated. And now, the glass he poured was sitting 2 feet from my sink, frozen in place, like a story waiting to be told. One I fully intended to finish. It wasn't the first time something didn't feel right. Not by a long shot. Growing up with my father meant living under a system of invisible rules. Not the kind you broke and got grounded for, those were easy. These were subtler, more psychological. Everything had strings. Compliments came with conditions. Help came with long-term costs. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. When I was 13, he started managing my asthma medication himself. Said doctors overprescribed. And a responsible man knows what his body needs. He'd ration doses based on behavior. Good grades meant refills. Bad days meant skipped puffs. Told my mother I was overreacting when I had an episode at school. She nodded along, said I needed to toughen up. By 16, I stopped asking her for anything. She floated through the house like a ghost, present in body, but never in conviction. When I told her I wanted to study film, she smiled and said, "Talk to your father." That was her refrain for everything. After college, I started dating someone seriously for the first time. Her name was Elise. Smart, kind, didn't care about money. My father invited her to dinner once and afterward told me she lacked ambition and wasn't right for the long haul. 3 weeks later, Elise pulled away without explanation. I found out much later he'd met with her privately. Still don't know what he said. Every success I carved out on my own was minimized. Every struggle became proof I should have listened to him. He said he believed in me, but always undercut it with doubt. Just want to keep you grounded. The world's not kind to idealists. You're smart, but not everyone's going to see it. My older brother, Theo, figured it out early. Left for Oregon at 19. We heard from him less and less over the years. Eventually, not at all. My father called it immaturity. My mother said he'd be back when he came to his senses. He never came back. And now, years later, the same man who taught me to distrust my instincts had poured me a glass of something I hadn't asked for, on a night that was supposed to be about me. I was done giving him the benefit of the doubt. I still had Sam's number saved from college buried somewhere beneath old contacts I hadn't touched in years. He'd studied chemistry. Back then, he helped me fake an exploding volcano for a video project. Now he worked at a private toxicology lab outside the city. Quiet place. Discreet clientele. I called during his lunch break. Didn't say much over the phone, just that I had something I needed tested, and that I trusted him not to ask too many questions. He didn't hesitate. "Bring it by after hours," he said. "Back entrance. I'll be the only one there." That night, I pulled the glass from the freezer. Still intact. Still wrapped. I double-bagged it, slid it into my backpack, and made the 45-minute drive in silence. I didn't turn on music. Didn't call anyone. The city blurred past my windows, without making a sound. Sam met me in the rear parking lot, waving me in through a side door. He looked the same older, but same unrushed demeanor, same unreadable expression. He didn't ask why I needed this. Just took the bag, held it up to the light, and nodded. "You want a full panel?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Anything you can find. Even trace." He didn't press. Just scribbled a note, labeled the bag with a code I didn't recognize, and handed me a receipt I wouldn't need. "I'll run it myself," he said. "Results in 3 days. Maybe 4, depending on the compounds." "Thanks," I said, starting to leave. Sam paused. "This something I should be worried about?" I stopped at the door, considered lying, then shook my head. "No, just something I need to be sure of." He didn't smile, just nodded once. I drove home with the weight of the empty glass replaced by something heavier. Not fear exactly, not even anticipation, just a kind of waiting I'd gotten too good at over the years. 3 days. After that, I'd know for certain whether the glass I never drank from had been meant to shut me up, slow me down, or wipe the whole night from my memory. And if it had, then this wasn't just a pattern anymore. It was a plan. 2 days into the wait, I started thinking less about what might have been in the glass and more about why he would do it in the first place. The answer wasn't obvious at first. My father was controlling. Yes, but not reckless. Not sloppy. If he really had drugged me, it wasn't out of spite. It would have been calculated, intentional. So I went back mentally. Then, literally through the last few conversations we'd had, I combed through texts, voicemail fragments, email threads he sent from his law office, half-coded in their usual paternal condescension. And there it was. 3 weeks before the dinner, he'd brought up Uncle Ron's estate. Casual at the time. Said something about estate headaches and how old wills create new messes. I hadn't thought much of it. Uncle Ron had passed last spring. Liver failure. And I hadn't seen him in years. We were never close, but he never married and didn't have kids. The funeral had been quiet, closed casket, handful of family. Nothing ceremonial. I remembered my father pulling me aside outside the church. Ron wasn't the most responsible man, he'd said, tone neutral. If he left you anything, I hope you'll be smart about it. He said it like I'd already made some mistake. At the time, I figured it was another lecture wrapped in concern. Now it landed differently. I called the estate lawyer the next morning. Told her I just wanted to confirm a few details. She checked the records. Yes, she said. The estate was finalized last month. As stated in the will, you're the sole beneficiary. I blinked. I thought he had stocks? Property? He did, she confirmed. The portfolio liquidated cleanly. Net disbursement after taxes came out to $482,000. It was deposited into your trust account. My stomach went still. My father hadn't mentioned that number, or that it was done. I hadn't touched the account, barely remembered it existed. And suddenly, I remembered him telling me at dinner, half laughing, that maybe it was time we started thinking about restructuring assets. I thought he meant his own firm. He hadn't. That glass on my birthday? It wasn't about a toast. It was about timing, position, leverage. I wasn't supposed to remember what happened that night. The call came on a Thursday. Sam's voice was calm, clinical, almost too calm. It tested positive, he said. High levels of lorazepam. I didn't respond right away. Just stared at the dark screen of my phone like I was waiting for a different answer. How high? I finally asked. Therapeutic dose for anxiety is 1 to 2 milligrams, he said. Your glass had residue consistent with closer to 6. I let that sit. Could have caused confusion, disorientation, blackouts. He continued. Depending on metabolism, weight. If you drank it all, possibly unconsciousness. Definitely impaired memory, especially with alcohol. So it wasn't hypothetical anymore. It wasn't suspicion, or instinct, or vague pattern recognition. It was chemical fact, documented, confirmed, sealed inside a Ziploc bag in my freezer. Do you want a written report? Sam asked. Yeah, I said. Make it clean. No lab letterhead. Just a private analysis, like you're helping a friend. I already figured, he replied. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the grain in the wood for a long time. The same table I'd put together myself 2 years earlier when I moved into this place. My father had told me I should have just paid someone. Your time's worth more than your pride, he'd said. Now, I understood he meant something else entirely. I opened the freezer, pulled the glass out slowly, like it might detonate. I didn't need to look at it again. I just held it, heavy in my hand, cold, but not as cold as I felt. He'd tried to erase a night he couldn't control, to sedate the one person standing in the way of what he wanted, the inheritance, the image, the leverage. But the plan had failed, because I noticed, because I didn't drink, because I had learned, finally, to stop playing his game. And now, I had the evidence to prove it. Not just to myself, but to anyone who needed to see it. I waited a week before showing up at his door, long enough for him to believe the night had blown over, long enough to make my visit seem casual. Intentional patience, controlled timing. He'd taught me that, even if he didn't realize it. When he opened the door, he looked worse than usual, pale, slightly drawn but still polished. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Well, this is a surprise, he said. I shrugged. Wanted to check in. That dinner ended weird. Thought I'd stop by. He waved me in, stepping aside with the same mock gentle courtesy he used with clients and police officers. It was nothing, he said. Probably the oysters. Or maybe I skipped lunch. I've been running on fumes lately. I followed him into the study, letting my eyes scan the room as if I hadn't been here 100 times before. The furniture was still the same. Walnut desk, leather chair, built-in shelves arranged more for show than reading. The same clock ticked softly above the fireplace, just enough sound to mask quieter movements. He poured himself a scotch, didn't offer me one. I declined before he could pretend to. So, he said, settling into his chair. Have you thought more about what I mentioned? About the inheritance? I know it's technically yours, but money like that can vanish fast if you're not careful. A trust might be safer. I could help manage it. There it was wrapped in concern, dressed up as advice. The pitch. Clean delivery. No acknowledgement of what almost happened. I'll think about it, I said, keeping my voice even. He nodded, satisfied, took a long sip of his drink. I leaned forward slightly, dropping my bag beside the desk, unzipped it, pulled out a leather notebook I'd brought as cover. And beneath that, tucked in the spine, a small voice recorder no larger than a key fob. I slid it under the edge of the desk as I shifted to grab a pen. He didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. We talked for another 15 minutes work, the weather, some case he was mediating. When I left, he clapped me on the back and said, "Good to see you coming around." I smiled. But the recorder was still running under his desk. It took 2 days before I got what I needed. I waited until he left for his weekly squash match same time every Thursday. I let myself back in with the emergency key still hidden behind the fuse box outside. He hadn't changed it. That told me he still underestimated me. The recorder was right where I'd left it. Battery light blinking. I tucked it into my coat pocket and left without touching anything else. Back home, I plugged it into my laptop and listened through a pair of headphones. At first, it was static and silence. A few chair creaks, the faint clink of glass on wood, pages turning. Then footsteps. His voice. "Yeah. He stopped by yesterday." "No. Didn't mention anything." A pause. "I don't think he suspects." Played it cool. Smarter than I gave him credit for. My jaw clenched. But I stayed still. I let it keep playing. "He didn't drink it," he said. Quieter now. I watched him, and he didn't swallow. Switched glasses, I think. Subtle. He's learning. Another pause. Then, "We'll have to try something else. Maybe the paperwork angle's not detail-oriented, I can use that. Or push the financial pressure. Get him to hand over the trust for protection, whatever it takes." Silence. Except for a low hum whoever he was talking to wasn't on speaker. "No. I haven't told Lorraine. She wouldn't understand. And if this goes sideways, I want distance." Lorraine. My mother. "I'll get Alan to draft a version of the restructure that looks clean. He owes me a favor from the Westbrook thing." Alan. Family attorney. Always played both sides. I paused the playback. There it was. Not just confirmation, but strategy. This hadn't been a one-time lapse in judgment. It was a process. Coordinated, premeditated. A drugged glass was just step one. When that failed, they were already planning step two. I let the recording play to the end, fast-forwarding through the silence, the casual whistle of his breath as he scrawled something down. Then I ejected the recorder, labeled the file, and copied it twice. One copy stayed on my laptop. One went to the encrypted drive I kept in a fireproof box under the bed. I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. But when I did, I wasn't coming empty-handed. The problem with being raised by someone who manipulates for a living is that you learn to check everything twice. I contacted the original lawyer who handled Uncle Ron's estate, Gail Hirschman. Her name had been on the paperwork when I signed the preliminary documents, but when I checked more recently, all communications were coming from a different office, a firm I didn't recognize. My father had called it a referral during the funeral, said Ron's records were a mess and Gail had retired. She hadn't. She picked up on the third ring, polite, but guarded. I reintroduced myself, told her I had some follow-up questions about the inheritance. "You're the beneficiary," she said, voice steady. "Everything went through probate cleanly. Is there a problem?" "Just tying up loose ends," I said. "Wanted to confirm the document trail." She sighed. "I was removed from the case 3 weeks after filing the initial disbursement recommendation. Your father said you asked for someone else to handle it." "I didn't. I asked if she had records of any document amendments." There was a pause. Then, "Yes, actually. An unsigned draft showed up midway through the process, an addendum that would have split the inheritance between you and your father. It wasn't properly filed. No signatures. Looked suspicious, honestly. We ignored it. I asked if she still had a copy. She did. I had her forward it to me. The attached PDF showed an amendment drafted in my name, with a shaky version of my signature at the bottom. Off-center. Slightly wrong. The name at the bottom corner was Alan Friedman, me, father's longtime associate. The same one mentioned on the voice recording. I thanked Gail and ended the call. That night, I printed every document I had, state paperwork, the fraudulent amendment, the toxicology report, and a transcript of the audio file. I labeled each and sealed them in an envelope. Then I sent a text to my mother, Nora, and my father. "Family dinner. My place. Sunday night. Everyone. Non-negotiable." No one argued. They knew the tone. Dinner started like it always did too, polite. My mother commented on the table settings. My father brought wine. Nora asked about work. I answered everything in clipped, neutral tones, let the small talk pile up like dry leaves. I waited until dessert. The dining room was quiet, except for the scrape of forks and the occasional cough. My father was halfway through a story about an old client when I reached under the table, pulled out a small Bluetooth speaker, and placed it on the tablecloth. No one moved. I tapped my phone once. The recording played. He didn't drink it. Switched glasses, I think. Smarter than I gave him credit for. My mother's fork stopped mid-air. "We'll have to try something else. Maybe the paperwork angle's not detail-oriented. I can use that." Nora blinked. Frozen. My father's jaw tightened. "Alan can draft a version of the restructure that looks clean. He owes me a favor from the Westbrook thing." I let it play to the end. Then silence. For 10 full seconds, no one spoke. Then my father leaned forward, slow and deliberate. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" "I'm not accusing you," I said calmly. "I'm documenting you." He opened his mouth. I cut him off, placing a folder on the table and sliding it toward my mother. "Toxicology report. 6 milligrams of lorazepam. In the drink you poured me on my birthday." Another paper. An unsigned amendment to Uncle Ron's will. Signature forged. "Filed through your friend Alan." My mother looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time in years, she didn't nod in agreement. Nora stood up and walked to the kitchen without a word. My father kept his eyes on me. Fury behind them. But no denial. No apology. Just silence. "I don't want anything from you," I said. "But if you come near my finances, my accounts, or my life, again this goes to the police, the bar association, and the press." Still, he said nothing. Eventually, he stood. "I should go." "Yeah," I said. "You should." He didn't look back. And no one stopped him. He came to my apartment the next morning. No warning, no text. Just the knock sharp. Twice like, he still lived in a world where people answered him out of reflex. I opened the door, didn't invite him in. He stepped past me anyway. "I don't know what game you think you're playing," he said, eyes scanning the apartment like it offended him. But this witch hunt? It ends now. I didn't reply. Just walked to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee. Left his empty. You edited that recording, he continued. Chopped up bits of conversation. Took things out of context. You think you're clever, but this is borderline entrapment. I leaned against the counter and sipped. So, your voice on the tape was fake? He didn't answer. You didn't say those things about me? About the trust? About Alan? His face twitched. Even if I did, none of it was illegal. It was a conversation between friends. You're blowing this out of proportion. I set the mug down carefully. I've documented everything, I said. Timestamps, emails, the amendment, the lab report. I know you tried to sedate me. I know you forged that signature, and I know exactly why. He started to speak, but I raised a hand. I'm filing a report with the bar this afternoon, and the State Ethics Board. If you retaliate in any way, financial, legal, personal, I'll go public. After all I've done for you, he said, voice low. That's the part you never understood, I replied. You didn't do it for me. You did it to keep control. He looked at me like I was someone he'd never quite seen before. Then, for the first time in my life, he stepped back. You're throwing away your family. No, I said. I'm finally keeping it safe. He left without another word. I locked the door behind him, deleted his number, and blocked every known alias he used to reach me. Then I called the Bar Association and scheduled the report review. Control ends when silence does. And I was done being silent. Theo answered on the second ring. There was a long pause after I said his name. I could hear background noise wind. A dog barking, maybe a radio. Then his voice, cautious, but not unkind. It's been a while. It has, I said. We hadn't spoken in almost 8 years. He left without fanfare. Just packed a bag, booked a one-way ticket to Oregon, and stopped returning calls. At the time, I thought it was cruel. Now I understood. I wanted to tell you something, I said. And I did. All of it. The birthday dinner, the glass, the tape, the forged will, our father's carefully engineered downfall. Theo listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said quietly, Yeah, that tracks. You knew? I knew enough. Not about the money, but the way he operates. Nothing's ever for your benefit, only ever for his. We talked for nearly an hour. At the end, he asked if I was okay. I didn't know how to answer. I'm getting there, I said. In the days that followed, I started rebuilding not with revenge, but with clarity. I contacted my bank and froze all shared accounts, reissued every card, set up new online logins with multi-factor authentication, hired a new attorney who didn't know my father. We reviewed the trust, rewrote the beneficiary terms, and revoked any dormant powers of attorney. I called the estate lawyer and filed a fraud alert on the amendment paperwork. I forwarded a redacted version of the toxicology report to my mother, along with a note that simply read, You don't have to believe me. But this happened. She didn't respond. That was fine. I wasn't doing this for her anymore. I changed the locks to my apartment, added a security system, and started scanning my mail before I opened it. Paranoid? Maybe. But this time, I wanted to see trouble coming before it reached my door. I had let so much slide over the years in the name of family, loyalty, tradition. But now, I was drawing a linen knot in anger. Not even in grief, but in quiet resolve. My father had tried to erase my memory. Instead, he sharpened it. And I intended to remember everything. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I got a message. Not a call. Not an email. A printed letter typed, of course, in his usual serif font, folded neatly in thirds and tucked into an envelope with no return address. The handwriting on the front was unmistakably his. Precise. Balanced. Controlled. I didn't open it right away, left it on the counter for hours, made coffee, cleaned the sink, took out the trash, came back, stared at it again, like it might vanish if I waited long enough. Eventually, I slid my thumb under the flap and unfolded the page. It was everything I expected. A tone of reconciliation layered over veiled threats. No apology, of course. Just phrases like, "Let's not escalate this any further," and "We've both made mistakes." A suggestion that we meet in person to discuss a possible path forward. He used the word misunderstanding 3 times. I read it once, then again, slower. Not because I was unsure, just to let it fully confirm what I already knew. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't even surprised. To him, this wasn't betrayal. It was business. A failed negotiation. A misstep in a power dynamic. He still thought he could reset. I folded the letter back into thirds and dropped it into the trash without ceremony. No ritual, no response. Just gravity, doing what it does, best pulling things to where they belong. The strange thing was, I didn't feel anger. Not even sadness. Just clarity. The kind that comes when you stop wishing people were different and finally start believing what they've shown you over and over. This wasn't a breaking point. It was a reveal. My father didn't lose me the night he poured something in my glass. He lost me years ago in every conversation that sounded like concern but carried the weight of a transaction. In every withheld affection, every conditional favor, every moment he chose power over connection. He just never realized it until now. Some people say blood is thicker than water, but poison flows just as fast. And I've learned how to stop drinking from the cup. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.